Persephone, Archetype of the Daughter. This is the class outline, so you're aware of what we will be doing today. We'll start with a guided manifestation. We will talk about the mythos of the goddess herself. We'll discuss her archetypal voice and its significance in our lives, and ways to invoke Persephone, journaling prompts, as well as an open forum at the end of class where you will have the opportunity to talk about what your experiences are of the class itself and what it brings up for you, because I'm sure it will bring up some deep emotional epiphanies and experiences. So to begin, I would like to start with our goddess manifestation. And if you would like to get as comfortable as you would like, root your feet to the floor, relax your shoulders, take a deep cleansing breath. You may close your eyes if you would care to. And I will guide you through what we are doing in just a second here. And Hallie, you made it. Thank you so much. Yay, Hallie is here. So good. Okay. Okay, that's wonderful. You made it just in time. We are going to go ahead and start with a manifestation. Okay. Can you still see my share screen? Is it still there? No. Okay. Thank you. If you would like to go ahead and put your feet on the floor, roll your shoulders back, take a few deep breaths, close your eyes. We're going to enter into a sacred space where we will be invoking the goddess Persephone. Goddess of grain, joy, youthful exuberance, innocence, daughterly power. Come to this place, this sacred space, to be with us. Show us how to remember the visions we had as girls, our biggest dreams and lofty goals. Share with us the loving spirit of your daughterly presence. Teach us to deeply experience the vulnerability and duality which brought us to adulthood. Be present as we explore what our awakening was, our maturation and discovery of our power as women. Within the shadows of self-doubt, trauma, anxiety, fear of separation, abandonment, and despair, shed the light of your core, filling us and our hearts with your golden, glowing light so that we may find joy and inspiration. Teach us of compassion, empathy, magic, and loving power as the queens of our manifested heroic journeys towards self-empowerment. Allow us to be in the space of your duality and to safely traverse our emotional waters to emerge renewed and ready to begin anew the cycle of our creativity. Be with us in harmony as you are with your mother, and allow us to feel the connection of power shared with your kingly husband. Beautiful, free-spirited Persephone, be with us in communion as we learn more about your presence within ourselves. Take a few deep breaths. When you are ready, you may open your eyes and join me in this sacred space protected by the goddess Persephone. Welcome to class. feel very relaxed. I hope you do as well. I would like to begin the learning process of Persephone and her mythos by sharing some of her story with you as it pertains to us and our lives and how we can derive inspiration from it. Persephone is the archetypal and iconic daughter goddess in the Greek pantheon. We think of her thus because she, of all of the offspring of the Olympian gods, is the one who had the most profound bond with a parental figure, that being her mother, Demeter. Demeter is the goddess of the harvest and incredibly powerful and nurturing primal goddess. Her connection with her daughter was karmic and, of course, fated to be this way, but also because I believe their powers were symbiotic, where Demeter was the goddess of the harvest and of cultivation, and Persephone's powers presided over the grains, so life-sustaining, nurturing grains such as wheat, corn, barley, millet, amaranth, of the such. And she was the personification of the maiden energy in the earlier parts of her mythology. So you would find her in the daughterly role, supportive of her mother while also gaining all of the support of the wisdom of her mother, Demeter. But she brought to Demeter a sense of life, lively energy, joy. She is the free-spirited, frequently singing, dancing goddess found with her nymphs on hillsides, gathering wildflowers as much as she was tending to her crops. And she has this profound power just of being graceful, full of light and energy and beauty. And she is just this wonderful embodiment of that young, youthful spirit. Pardon me while I check who might be contacting me. Okay, that's fine. Students contacting me. Her story is such that she is very tied to her mother, but not as much to her father, Zeus. And that was more of a tactical decision, I would say, on Zeus's part. There was always that tension between Zeus and his wife, Hera. And she didn't appreciate his children with other deities. So I believe he kind of stepped back a bit. And when Demeter's energy was so strong as a parental figure, it kind of worked itself out in that respect. So Persephone didn't particularly have to feel too much of the loss of that connection with her father. He was always there kind of on the periphery, but it wasn't the influence in her life that made the most impact until later. So as the story goes, and I will be focusing on this for most of the class, is what happened to Persephone, why she became known as a dualistic goddess, why she became a queen of the underworld, as well as being the upper world goddess of the grain. So Hades, her uncle, is one of the three brother gods that made up the kings of the world as it was. And they drew lots, the three brothers. And you can say that it was fated, that they were meant to draw the lots they chose, because personality-wise and power-wise, it worked for them. Zeus, the heroic god that set all of his siblings free from the stomach of his father, Kronos, who had swallowed them to prevent the overthrowing of his own power. Zeus drew the lot of the heavens. He became the sky god and the king of all the gods. Poseidon, a very emotional and turbulent god, drew the lot of the earth and ocean. He's known as Earth Shaker. Hades, a very profound god and very intelligent, and intense, he drew the lot of the underworld. And it wasn't for his lack of ability to have power and to influence. It was unfortunately the lot he drew, but he had a lot of resentment with that because he was very powerful. So there are myths in which he fights back and attempts to claim the throne of Zeus. Does not work, of course. But as among many sibling rivalry sort of relationships, when Hades approached Zeus to ask a big favor, Zeus did not feel that he could refuse his brother, and he felt pity for him. So Hades had this incredible experience of viewing Persephone from his magical kingdom under the ground, and having witnessed her energy and experienced her whenever he was above ground, but he could feel her more than anything. He could hear her singing. He had a very profound experience of this beautiful maiden goddess, and he fell in love with her. So he approached Zeus and asked for her hand in marriage. And that was the favor Zeus felt he couldn't refuse. And it was partially political and partially because he felt for his brother, and his daughter would become queen of the underworld. Now, Demeter was not consulted. And that was also because they knew Demeter would refuse this union. She was too connected to Persephone, and she would not have allowed Hades to take her away, and certainly not to the underworld. Just wouldn't have been something Demeter would have chosen for her daughter. So when Hades had permission to marry Persephone, but he had to devise a way to separate her from her mother and get her alone and take her to the underworld. And so he found a moment when Persephone was off with her nymphs, the sacred nymphs that were sworn companions of her and there to be with her, protect her, and be her handmaidens of such. And they were off dancing in a field of flowers on a hillside far flung away from Demeter. And Persephone felt something, and she was very, very aware. And she felt drawn to this particular flower that was set off aside by itself. It was a very deep, dark-colored narcissus, and she was compelled to it. Everything about it drew her to it, and of course it was enchanted. She picked it, and the moment that she did so, a huge crevice opened in the earth, and out sprang Hades, wielding his bident and his inky chariot with black stallions, and he swept up beside her, grabbed her, and tore off down into the underworld. She barely had time to fling her girdle and screamed for her nymphs so that they might know something of what happened to her, and then she was gone. Demeter sensed this immediately, but she didn't know what had happened, and the nymphs may or may not have completely known the story of what happened to her. They brought back the girdle. They told Demeter that she is gone. Persephone was totally gone. They couldn't find her anywhere. And Demeter went into grief-stricken, inward, focused, painful space over the loss of her daughter, and she refused to stop looking for Persephone. And that started a famine. She refused to let anything grow. She left off all of her duties. She started wandering the world looking for Persephone. She begged the gods to tell her. Nobody would. Zeus in particular kept silent. He refused to let any of that information go. And everyone else was afraid because Hades was quite powerful, and they didn't want to get on his bad side either. So even if any of the other gods or demigods knew anything, they were afraid to tell what had happened. So that's one aspect of the myth. That's the upper realm, the motherly loss of daughter. And she absolutely had no clue what had happened to her. When we look at it from the perspective of Persephone in the underworld, there is so much to this, because she goes from being the childlike, innocent maiden to being stolen, taken, and forced into a marriage she didn't know was arranged for her in the underworld, away from the sunlight, anything that grew, away from her songbirds, her nymphs, her flowers, her grains, her mother. It was trauma that completely scarred her. And she tried to withdraw inside herself. She pled with Hades to let her go. And of course he wouldn't. He's like, you are my queen now. I will do anything for you to make you happy. And to Hades' credit, he did as much as he possibly could to lavish Persephone with every thinkable comfort that he could provide her, even though it was the underworld. He was not only the god of death, he presides over not only that, spirit realm, but also over wealth. So his presence in mortal world was greatly important because people wanted to give him sufficient tribute to make sure they had a good underworld experience and would go on to the Elysian Fields and not to Tartarus to be tortured. So the Elysian Fields were the paradise in the underworld. So he was greatly respected, if not slightly feared for obvious reasons, but he was also praised and worshipped for wealth. So he would be offered things to help entice and bring wealth, like when you think of manifesting and bringing riches and wealth to oneself. Hades would be the god to worship in that respect. So he offered Persephone so much, and all the love he was capable of giving, which was pretty great considering, he was a god and he was one of the three brothers. So there was that aspect to the relationship, but he was cold to the touch to her at first, and she was repelled by him. She didn't want him. She wanted to leave, and it was an awful experience. So when we look at this from Persephone's perspective, there's the trauma of a blunt and rude awakening. Now, for most young women, that isn't the case when they come of age and are able to have their first sexual encounters. We hope for the best possible circumstances for that person, but that isn't always the case. So part of the work with Persephone is to recognize that she also represents the abused or vulnerable young woman coming to age and coming into her power as a sexual woman in possibly a circumstance that was uncomfortable for her, or in a circumstance that was completely off base. Like you could think of the young woman that was girly and cute and into all kinds of light and fluffy things when she was young, suddenly getting interested and into the bad boys that wore leather. For example, just saying, gentlemen that were not seemingly of her taste, being drawn to that kind of, rugged, different archetypally speaking gentleman. So Hades would have been like that. And so this whole experience that she goes through, and this experience in the underworld, and what she was learning about herself in this, was her ability to withstand a lot of stress and a lot of darkness. Being a goddess of light and energy, she began to develop different powers. She began to use her own light from within to illuminate, to find her own powers in the underworld, to draw it instead from the drawing up from, the growth of the plants above ground, feeling them from below, where they germinate, where the roots are, getting into herself, into her powerful space as a woman as she became a queen. Now, in this aspect, within the first time of Persephone being in this space, she isn't fully aware of what that power is like, but it is more like along the lines of becoming a sorceress, using the magic and the energy of the underworld to create new things, different experiences, while also being tender, compassionate, empathetic, and nurturing the spirits that come through the underworld as a benevolent queen. She balanced out the emotional turmoil that Hades is so often represented as having by giving him the light of her energy as well, and kind of calming his energy and spirit, all that resentment and the stress of being in the darkness. He didn't want that either. He claimed it because it was his kingdom, but it wasn't really his happy place. As I say, he tried to take the throne from Zeus and claim ultimate power over the heavens. Didn't work. So Persephone spends this time in the underworld, and it seems to go on interminably. And during this time, she has not had any sustenance. And being immortal and being a goddess, it wasn't necessarily something she had to do, but she started to wither and fade and draw into herself a little bit more in protest, because she felt it wasn't right that she couldn't go back home. She couldn't visit her mother. And there's that archetypal kind of thing for a young woman. Can you really ever feel the same again? Can you really ever just go back home and be protected in that youthful maiden-like state by your mother? I can say that for most young women, there is a point in the development of maturity where that is a deeply profound feeling. Hopefully, if the connection with a mother is a good one and not a dysfunctional relationship, that there is that need to feel that innocence again at some point during the maturation process of coming into your power as a woman. So in the upper world, Demeter went through her whole adventure, which we discussed in the previous class, where she goes to Ulysses and she becomes a nursemaid disguised as a crone to the princes there. And through several experiences she has there, one of them trying to turn Persephone into an immortal by burning away his mortality. She's discovered by the mother of this child, who screams and says, "Get my baby out of the fire." So at which point she reveals herself and who she actually is. And the mortals back way off and apologize, of course. But she then decides that she has to continue her journey. She can't stop looking for Persephone. So eventually, the world is going barren. Animals are starting to die off. Humans are suffering. They cannot provide for themselves because the bounty is gone. It's being withheld. And it's the first major mythological famine of the mythos, right? So Helios, the sun itself, sees all as he traverses the heavens throughout the day, and he witnessed what happened to Persephone and gives in and tells Demeter to comfort her and to let her know what really happened to her daughter. At which point you can imagine the rage that she felt toward her brother Zeus, former consort, at having allowed this to happen. So she, at that point, takes it one step further and won't allow any of Zeus's rains to fall, which throws the ecosystem off even more. And Zeus says, "Okay, I will do what I can to bring Persephone back to you." And he sends the only god who can traverse comfortably back and forth between the upper world and the underworld, which is Hermes, the trickster god and god of commerce, travel, communication. And he has winged sandals, so he comes and goes, ferrying souls, taking the souls to the underworld, and he does this on a regular basis. So he is allowed to go and is told to bring Persephone back. Hello, Lillian.
Hi.
Hi. If you wouldn't mind putting your mic on mute for me, as I'm
yes,
still.
Yes, ma'am. I will.
Thank you so much. Welcome. Thank you for joining.
Thank you.
So at this point, then, we have the part of the myth. This is one of the crucial points in this myth, where Hermes does go. He gets Persephone, and Hades realizes it's time. He has to relent at this point. If all of this awful things are happening up above, more people are dying, which is okay, but there are a lot more spirits coming into the underworld. He knows something is very off. So he does agree to let Persephone go back to her mother, but he's cunning, and he devises one last token to give to Persephone to show how much he loves her. He gives her a pomegranate. Pomegranate is associated with fertility, And it's a very powerful symbolism in ancient Greek mythology, and it's associated with Persephone before coming back up. And of course, with a lot of tears and gratitude, she hugs him, she kisses him, she thanks him, and she eats 6 pomegranate seeds before returning to her mother. So there's this incredibly joyful moment when Persephone comes back up to the upper world. She meets up with her mother. There's this huge embrace, and life starts to just spring forth around them. The joy of being reunited, mother and daughter, seemingly mother and maiden again, except that it's not the same. And Hades appears and he says, wait, she cannot actually leave because she ate food from the underworld. So it's a really dark moment. And the mother and daughter are horrified, and Persephone realizes what she's done. She knew, all the gods know, you don't eat or ingest anything in the underworld lest you be condemned to stay there forever. It's part of Hades' magic and what he creates to keep his realm intact. And that's what he did. He used this to ensure that his wife wouldn't completely leave him. So they strike a bargain, and a balance is won, where Persephone spends half the year with her mother and does her work in the upper realm, and half the year with Hades in the underworld, where she reigns as queen. So it's an interesting and powerful dualistic story, and one that gives us pause to think, because in the ancient stories, from this whole experience came the first agrarian concepts, the mysteries, the Eleusinian mysteries, where they learned from the goddesses, particularly from Demeter, but from Persephone as well, how to produce agriculture, how to save seeds, how to plant them, tend them, grow them, and then toward the end of the season, harvest and store what they needed for the lean and barren months when Demeter went inward, retreated, went into her crone-like state, waiting for Persephone to return. This is how, in the ancient Greek stories, the myths, we have the beginning of the cycles of the seasons. So when Persephone is in the underworld, when she leaves, it is fall. When she's fully gone, and in those months when Demeter is grieving and going inward, we have winter. We have spring when Persephone begins to emerge again. And then as she does her work with her mother, we have the high bloom of fertile, beautiful, and abundant summer. So that is the bulk of the myth of Persephone. Now we get into some interesting things to look at. And this has to do with how to work with the goddess archetype within ourselves, and to recognize certain themes as they appear to us when we think about this powerful goddess. So there is the aspect of her being the archetypal daughter, and that's a very powerful place within us. But we take that one step further, psychologically speaking, she's our inner child. Persephone represents that within us. Then she also not only just represents the innocence of that inner child, she represents the forming of the transition we all go through of when we start to lose touch with that inner child and begin to mature into womanhood. The transition period is extremely powerful. And as adult women, we become distracted from a lot of what's in our core. Now, Persephone's other name was core. And when you think about that, it makes a lot of sense. The inner essence of the power of this goddess is right in the core of her being. And she's lovely, and she has all of this big energy and beautiful spirit. So one of the things to look at when approaching Persephone is to get in touch with your inner child again and to look at what that feels like and what it was like for you when you were in that powerful place. Now, when I was a girl, I felt powerful. My imagination was always at work. And as you know, I'm a painter and an artist and a singer. I'm always a writer. I have always loved all of that. So all of that was me. And I identified and still do identify with Alice in Wonderland for myself. And that's a very powerful inner child story unto itself, that archetype of Alice. So if you get in touch with that inner child feeling, it's interesting to go back and note what it was that were your most powerful visions for yourself and what you felt about yourself, the confidences you may have had. And then we take that further and we look at the connection with the mother archetype within ourselves, which we can do now, but also externally, your literal mother figure. And this is where there's some very powerful work to be done, because no matter how wonderful your mother was or is, there's always something there for a woman. It is the archetypal seed or need to be connected to one's mother. And then there's that old adage that every woman becomes her mother. Well, how do we do that gracefully and go beyond our mothers? Because Persephone at one point in her myth has to go beyond her mother, to leave her, to go back, to be a queen. Now, Demeter, as powerful as she was, and she is extremely powerful, she wasn't the queen of her realm. Hera was the queen of the gods, right? But we don't really think of many other queens in that respect. There's Persephone, queen of the underworld. And she claims that power for herself, and she becomes more powerful than she ever realized before when she was in the upper world. So this is powerful work. And if you had a dysfunctional connection or still have a dysfunctional connection with your mother archetype or literal mother, there's a lot of work that can be done using the Persephone archetype to heal that connection. And it's the ability to be empathetic to the situation, to your inner child, your youth coming into oneself, and to recognize the triggers, the habitual emotional responses that you may have in your life to certain stimuli, to stress, to anxiety, to the mother connection, and what you can do to help yourself in those moments to bring yourself back into the core of your true essence. When we are children, when we are young, there is nothing there that in the beginning takes us away, provided any awful trauma, and that can happen. But for the most part, with young girls and young women, there is that assuredness of, this is who I am, and this is what I want to be. And there's a major confidence with that. So if we're ever struggling as adults with, I don't know what I'm doing, everything's a mess, I can't seem to quite get things going, I'm a really stressed out parent, I don't know, how did my mom do this? Or why can't I seem to reconcile the relationship I have with my mother with the life I have now? And what does that look like? How can I integrate who I am as a daughter into my life as an adult in a healthy way and celebrate the power of that connection? So those are all a lot of powerful things to look at with the Persephone archetype. And when you're in those funks, when you're dark in the deep muck of the shadow side of your psyche, Persephone is there. She's always there in your core, ready to come forward if you would allow that part of yourself to take center stage. Now, what I'm working with in the book that I'm writing is how to work with the different archetypal voices. how to choose them. And I call that emotional alchemy. Rather than allowing situations to overtly influence yourself and your mental state, be it baggage or repetitive emotional cycles that you just can't seem to break. Emotional alchemy for me is the ability to transform those base emotions into gold, bring them up, shed some light on them, look at them, and decide which voice you want to use in the moment. So if you are having issues with inspiration, feeling like you're stuck, wanting to feel the connection with your mother, knowing that you need to claim your own power in a queenly fashion and be just benevolent and wonderful about it and empathetic and protective, then that Persephone energy is the one to call forth. And we all have all of the archetypal voices within us, both male and female. Right now, we're focusing on the female aspects. So Persephone is there for you to help uplift and shed light on anything that you're struggling with. And she's there in moments of levity. Those moments when you think no one's watching and you're dancing around singing with abandon. When you're out, you just have to get all the flowers from the flower shop and all the plants to put out in your garden. That's your Persephone moment. She's there for you. So for a moment here, I'm going to go back to share screen and we can take a look at some other interesting things. So I would like to discuss with you about how to invoke, the ways that you can invoke Persephone in a literal and physical way in your life so that you can manifest her. Okay, so these are things that you're welcome to go ahead and screenshot. And of course, if you have your pen and journal handy, go ahead and jot these down. So with manifesting the grain goddess and queen of Hades, here are some things to contemplate. Being in nature, cultivating a kitchen garden and flowers, communing with your inner child, working with the power of duality, singing and dancing, being vulnerable and knowing your core self, manifesting your true and highest power. And then the items of power to use and work with are flowers, corn, wheat, grains, and pomegranates. The accessories would be decorations of songbirds, bats, nature patterns, symbols of fertility and gardening. Essential oils you may wear or work with would be lavender, ylang-ylang, sweet orange, and myrrh. Crystals to use to help invoke and bring the goddess to you would be black tourmaline, lepidolite, peridot, and garnet, of course, among others. And then I also have some really great journaling prompts for you. Again, screenshot this, photograph it, whatever you feel like you need to do, or write them down. We'll take a couple of minutes to go through these journaling prompts. This is how to work with particular prompts to allow yourself to express and discover more about your inner Persephone. So, how does expressing vulnerability bring me personal power? What steps will I take to overcome stress and anxiety when faced with adversity? What are my earliest dreams and desires, and how do they influence me as an adult? My inner child is part of me, and she is safe because I, whatever that is. The relationship I have with my mother is powerful because, and whatever that is. I'll leave this up for just a moment in case you want to write some more of those down. So these are all powerful concepts to work with while journaling, and you will discover more. And once you start going there and going to that deep core within yourself, I know that you're going to not only receive answers, but you're going to keep having questions come up for you to answer, especially in those moments when you are feeling the most vulnerable. That's when you're really going to start using, like training a muscle, training your Persephone voice and energy to come forward within you to help you through, because she was very strong. She was able to withstand adversity and come out the other side mature, balanced, able to use new powers she didn't realize she had, and very regal and queenly. So that, my lovelies, is Persephone's energy. Now we have a few more minutes left to class, and I would love to invite you to unmute, and we will have our open forum where we are in the safe space to discuss all things Persephone and what may have come up for you. So anybody who would like to go ahead and speak, go ahead and raise your hand, unmute yourself, and let's share together.
I have a question for you. It's a little more general.
Sure.
Do you believe that we all have parts of these goddesses within ourselves? Or is it more the knowledge of how we can relate their stories into parts of our story? Because I was, as you were speaking, I was thinking about my own relationship with my mother. And I don't know, it's complex. She would have a different perspective than I would, for sure. And as I've gotten more in tune with myself, so I'm thinking about what you said about like the core, I actually feel less connected to my own mother. So that was kind of what I was curious about, because I was thinking of the mother-daughter relationship that exists between Demeter and Persephone. I don't feel like I personally have that, although there were things about Persephone's story that resonate with me, but not complete. So anyway, I was just curious, how do you kind of reconcile
Absolutely.
that?
Let me get into that. So when we talk about the archetypes and we look at them from the Jungian psychological perspective of things, where we have the different manifestations within ourselves of those very precise and easy to follow aspects of personalities. Now, the gods were solid. Whatever they were, they were. So that's why it's great to look at the myths, especially like for me with the ancient Greek mythology, but all cultures have those archetypal stories and characters. So within that, okay, we have all of the different voices of influencing aspects of our personality. So with the Persephone one being, that's why I say she's like the archetype of the daughter or the inner child. We all have that. However, and interestingly, just because there is the Demeter and the Persephone element to this doesn't necessarily mean you are going to have that connection with your mother. Perhaps if your mother's main archetype was or is a Demeter archetype, then that may have been more prominent, but maybe she's a Hera. Maybe she's an Artemis and may not be as, you know, that kind of nurturer or that kind of a mother archetype for you. It depends on your connection. That's why I said it's not necessarily that your connection with your mother is absolutely going to be like the Persephone and Demeter. We may not all have that kind of a connection with our mother figure. It may lean on the other side of the aspect of things of either dysfunction or disconnect. And that's also part of Persephone's myth. There was a big disconnect between them because she literally has to go as far away as possible and does something completely different. They are not connected to each other when they're separated from one another. So it would be interesting to think about how to integrate that for yourself, Hallie, what that connection is, what the power your relationship with your mother has had in your life. And if it isn't as nurturing, say, or supportive as it could have been, what was it that it brought to you? What did it teach you about yourself? Because there's always something. Yeah. Mother-daughter relationship, there's something.
Right. And then as a mother myself, of course, I think about what is the relationship my kids have with me? So that's kind of an interesting one too.
Right. So now you can put yourself in their shoes. And since you also have a daughter, and that time in her life too, she's coming into adolescence. That's a very powerful time.
Totally. And I think about that all the time.
And you remember being there yourself. So it's about using that empathy, that that is where like that Persephone energy is so powerful. So I do feel like there is and I'm not a particularly religious person. I'm very spiritualist. And I have had experiences in different places I've lived. As you know, I'm from Massachusetts. So I grew up with the lore of the ocean. I spent many, many years living in Asheville, North Carolina, where I had so many incredible experiences of multicultural influences. And I've lived in many other places, New York and Charleston, and of course, then to Florida for a while, LA, Mexico, spent some time in Europe. So wherever I've gone, I feel like I've had experiences along the way that have shown me, not only within myself, but in other people I've come into contact with, how clearly it is that we have these archetypes within us. The more experiences I feel like we have where we've witnessed different ways of approaching things, different experiences culturally, and just like getting really into the observation level of how people tend to react. And I know you know this. I know, I'm sure all of you do. When you walk in a room, do you ever have that experience of like, whoa, I'm walking in this room and I feel everything like coming at me at once? Or I walk in the room and I'm like, this person is not being genuine. What they really want to say is something very different. So we have the ability to like put on the masks of how we think we want to present ourselves in the moment, but sometimes that's you know when people are being disingenuous, when they're not really being who they really are in their core or what they want to do. They want to appear a certain way. So I have that experience frequently, and I don't know if any of you do, but that's where you start seeing those little archetypes coming out. Lillian, did you want to say something? I think you're on mute, sweetie. Go ahead and unmute yourself. If you can, just click on your little...
I'm touching our photo instead of the unmute icon. No, so much. I mean, I signed up for this because I just finished a novel and kind of anticipating the sequel, if you will, because it ends with the birth of a daughter. And in the sequel, the mother kind of, I mean, in the current novel, she sort of shares everything that's happened in her life toward the end. And that's how I see the thing beginning. So the mother is sort of cleansing herself of all these things she's hidden. But then to some extent, does she burden her daughter? And has she been burdened all along by not knowing? So that's one of the reasons. And then there are a couple of things. Just number one, apologies for I just came in from a hike and I realized that the class was on. I said, oh no. So, and then trying to deal with the technology initially. So,
yes, not to worry. You're more than welcome to join anytime.
But when you said about going as far, I started healing my relationship with my mother when I did go far. I moved to Japan. Part of that was just an opportunity to teach and everything else. But that sort of allowed me that separation, that ability to sort of deal with things without dealing with things, you know, without actually dealing with the relationship. And then over time, it's taken a really long time. My mother unfortunately passed in January. You know, we've had a wonderful relationship in my real adulthood. So, and you do, and what I was going to say even before a lot of the other things you said, is just that I understand her better with age, with time. And it's funny because I moved to Asheville to be with my daughter. So I kind of had to leave my mom. And now I'm in Asheville because, you know, my daughter had a baby, you know, 2 years ago. She'll be 2 in November.
Oh my goodness, what a small world. Asheville is dear to my heart. I love it.
I do love it. And I'm a New Yorker. So
you're a New Yorker. Okay, so similar, yeah. Yep,
really different. But a welcome difference. And it's funny because now I see my daughter every single day. And,
wonderful.
And I needed, you know, the separation. And you know, and then I really thought my mother would come with me. And unfortunately, she didn't make it. So, but everything that you're saying is wonderful. It's a new way to think about things and to process it while you're trying to figure it out. And I think it'll be something I will research, not so much that it'll play within the context of the story, but it might help me work out a lot of, the character, the character's backstory and depth. So this is great.
Wonderful. And one of the challenges I want to put to all of you is, how can you honor the mother presence in your life?
Right.
Whether or not it was the tight bond, the really close bond. Now, I am very closely bonded with my mother, but any relationship has its aspects that teach you something. So
absolutely,
looking at how to honor that presence in your life for whatever it taught you, to honor the mother archetype, because we look at the daughter archetype, she isn't the daughter without the mother.
Right.
So we have that within us as well. And Lillian, I will send you, or did I already send you the transcript from Demeter? Were you registered for the last class?
I was registered, but
Okay.
I didn't show up. And, it's been.
I did email it to you then. I did send
so I
you
will look
that
at
link.
Thank you.
If you are able to go back and watch Demeter, then you can get a sense, and that goes for any of you who may have received the link or seen it. I post it in my women's circle as well. And if you would like, while I'm here, I'll also post that for some of you who may not be there. Let me go ahead and get you those links. It would be wonderful for you to review it and then come back to Persephone with the idea of working with that daughter archetype from a different perspective, because it's all connected, and it's not just our literal mothers. Of course, I want to make that point as well. I mean, we have these archetypes within ourselves as well. Absolutely. So there's a lot there. Let me go ahead and pop some things in the chat. This is my women's group, Mystical Women's Circle in Facebook. And then let me give you this as well.
Okay.
This is my events page, which I know you all know, but I'm still going to post that. I have another class coming up, not this week, but the following, which is very powerful as well and very different, archetypally speaking, which will be about Hestia, goddess of the Hermites. That's she's like the Hermites archetype, and very, very, very powerful. So I hope you will take the moment to register for that one. Even if you are unable to attend the live, I welcome you to register anyway, and I will always send you the transcript of the video recording. And also, just as a note, and I know I mention this occasionally, that these classes are free, and I appreciate your attendance. I love having you here. I'm working at building this into a business for myself. So if you felt like supporting my work, if you click on the events link, which I just posted, at the very bottom, there's a donation button where you can tip whatever feels right to you if you choose to. But I invite you to register for the next class, and for sure join me in Mystical Women's Circle, because these are topics I like to discuss. So as you're working with this throughout the coming week, feel free to post questions there and write about your experiences. I would love to see what you come up with, and you're more than welcome to do so. Now, Alyssa and Monica, did you have anything to add today to the chat, and would you like to say anything before we sign off for the day? Thank you, Alyssa. Hello again. There you are. And you're free to unmute. Monica, go right ahead.
Yeah, I just noted when just describing the relationship of Demeter and Persephone, I have some friends who they literally have that relationship where it's like they have to be like physically with their mothers so much, and then they're just they're so depressed when they're away, and that's not my relationship. But I have a good connection. But it was interesting to see how there you can recognize it. Sometimes they're like textbook examples of the archetypes at work. So.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. There are. And I have been in that place myself in my life, but my story is unusual and wonderful, and I celebrate that. And I am physically very far away from my parents. They live in North Carolina. I'm in the West Coast in the Southern Californian desert. So really can't get much further away. So I have an intense connection with that Persephone archetype too, from a different kind of perspective from my own life. We can all get something from these stories because they're so powerful and wonderful and so ancient and primal. And the great thing is, it's not just in ancient Greece. You may find that you are like, okay, I'm going to need to go and research daughter archetypes from other cultures, because there are some amazing female stories from many different world cultures. And for example, Lillian in Japan, the mythology there is incredible.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've had the chance to experience that, but yes, there's some amazing stories. So there's a lot to it. There's a lot to all of it.
And my novel is about, the Yoruba goddess, Imanja or Jamaya, depending on where you want to speak of her. But again, she's defined as the mother of all women in all endeavors. So clearly I was dealing with things as, when I came up with the idea, and then I started writing it.
That's wonderful.
But a lot of fun. Yeah.
Absolutely. Oh, that's very powerful. Thank you for sharing that. Alyssa, did you have anything to add?
Thank you so much. I'm working on a play, and it's about the inner child. So just where I needed to be. And
perfect.
And today I'm going to be writing about from teenage perspective, Alyssa. So I'm in that transition. I need to go back and dive into it. So this is just like a great little place, and I'm going to sit down and write now.
Oh, fabulous. Well, I'm so glad you joined me. I'm very grateful that you were here, Alyssa, and I wish you the best of luck with your play. That's amazing. And if you need to just touch base with me anytime, you can write to me. I'm usually around. I pretty much mostly quarantined, so I'm here. If you ever need to discuss anything, contact me anytime, and I'm very happy and excited for you, Alyssa. That's wonderful. And again, thank you, all of you, for being here with me today. It means so much to have you here and to share all of this with you. And in closing, just want to remind you again, anytime you're interested, sign up for the classes. If you can't make it, I'll still email them to you, and I'm going to be adding more. Right now, Hestia is the last one posted, but there are more, and I'm going to be adding them bi-weekly from here on out. So thank you again. Peace and love to all of you, and let the goddesses inspire you. Big love.
I only have one hand. I'm on the phone, but that's a
half a heart. I'll fill up the other one. There we go. There you go. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.